Hello, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Alfano, and this is another episode of Awesome Vegans right here on Jane Unchained. So I'm in Illinois with a fellow Illinoisan, if I can say that, Executive Director of the Animal Legal Defense Fund. He is with me, Stephen Wells. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. In our hometown.
In our hometown.
Chicago.
So did you go to Northwestern?
No, I did not. I actually left to go to college. I left Chicago to go to college. I was here through high school.
What part did you grow up in?
North Side, so
Me too.
Started out in Wicker Park, Ravenswood, Rogers Park. For all you Chicago people, you know where that is.
Yes, okay. Sorry, people. We had to bond a little bit since we're both from Chicago. So you're in the city proper.
Yeah.
I love it.
In the city.
I love it. Okay, so it's been a year since the last conference, and I want to know what has changed in the last year. So where have we come in the last year for animal rights, and mostly where are we going?
Yeah, that's a huge question. Of course, from my perspective, we've seen some important changes in the law. ALDF won two really important appellate victories in the last year that we'll certainly talk about. The conference this year, by the way, the Animal Law Conference, is going to be focused on farmed animals, so on factory farming in particular.
Wonderful.
So one of our victories in the appellate court was the upholding of our ag-gag victory, which is our lawsuit to overturn a state law that made it a crime to take videos on factory farms. Really important for people to see what's going on factory farms and to be able to do something, and gathering evidence as well for purposes of prosecution or lawsuits that we might file. So that was a big victory.
Was that in all the states? Because there are many ag-gag states. North Carolina, I believe, is one of them. Iowa.
Correct. Yeah. So we won.
Utah?
We've beaten the ag-gag laws in Utah and Idaho.
Right.
We're currently suing Idaho, Arkansas, and North Carolina. Okay. And eventually we want to sue all the states that have ag-gag laws and overturn all of them.
Okay, and I just want to say, I know sometimes when people hear the word vegan or they hear the word animal rights, that's two words, they think extreme and off the charts. And I just want to respond that when you don't have truth in your food system, so when you don't have the right, all of us as a nation, to know what's going on in these farms, that means you have potential hazards for your own health in the food. Clearly, there are abuses to animals, and there are abuses to workers. So it behooves us all, no matter where you are on this spectrum, it behooves us all to get rid of these laws. Is that accurate, Stephen?
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yeah, and environmental laws. I don't know if you mentioned that.
I did not, but shame on me. I should have.
Environmental laws, very important.
Yes, and if you're in North Carolina, I gotta think you care about environmental laws, because my heart goes out to you. You're having a very tough season.
Yeah, tragic.
So we're focusing on factory farm animals this conference. You know, I was amazed to learn, I'm sorry to be slow on the uptick, people. I was amazed to learn recently that things you would be put in jail for if you ever did to your pet, such as drowning, you can do in a factory farm, and it is legal. Can I say that? Is it legal? Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. So the reality is there's no federal law that protects farmed animals while they're being raised for food and other purposes. And in most states, 42 states out of 50, they're actually exempt from state cruelty laws as well, kind of their only hope for protection.
Wait, I'm sorry. In 42 out of 50 states, you are exempt from... Why?
That's
why
right.
would that be?
Well, you know, if you've seen video from factory farms, you can see why the industry would want to be exempt from cruelty laws. But the big question is that okay with the public nowadays? I mean, those kinds of exemptions happened quite a while ago, and I think the public would have a very different take about that now. Now that we've seen videos of what goes on and it's kind of all out in the open, I don't think they would get away with that. But this is the problem for trying to protect farmed animals, for sure.
So I understand why the businesses would not want this information to come out, but they are not the majority, and we do not benefit from their getting wealthier. We all have an interest, I think, in seeing that our food source is properly raised. I don't understand, since we are the majority voice, why they would have the upper hand there.
Well, I think those laws have been in effect for a long time, those exemptions, I should say. And I think it would be very different. And we would very much like to challenge the factory farm exemptions and hope to do that at some point in the future, because I do think we're living in a very different paradigm now. And, you asked about some of the things that have changed. And I think one of the interesting things, and we'll hear a little bit about it, is the advent of things like plant-based alternatives. To meat, and also the up and coming cell cultured meat industry, where they'll be able to raise flesh, whatever you think of that, but raising flesh without the animal involved, so that you don't have the suffering and a lot of the environmental consequences and so forth. I mean, these are potential game changers going forward, but of course, there's always going to be, in the meantime, a lot of animal suffering on factory farms that we want to address.
So let me ask you a little bit about that, because I think that's very interesting. You say that things have changed and that the public, if they know these things now, they would feel differently. So talk to me about our cultural zeitgeist, where we've come in terms of how we view animals and really where we are now, because there does seem to me, and maybe I'm in my bubble, people from the other side might say Elizabeth is in her bubble, but it seems to me like people are more conscientious about this. They're opening up to, hey, wait, there's got to be a better way. I mean, side note, what has stayed the same from 1950 until 2018? Nothing. Who even hails a taxi anymore? Nobody does that. You get on your phone and there's a satellite that gets the thing. But the farming system has stayed the same. We can do better.
Yeah. Absolutely, we can. I think there's a lot of indicators about the change of heart that the public has had. Things like sweeping ballot initiatives that have passed to add incredibly increased farmed animal protections. Prop 2 in California in 2008, and now there's an even stronger version, Prop 12, and similar measures have passed in Massachusetts and Florida and so forth. And these aren't passing with small majorities, despite the efforts of the industry, the meat industry, to say, to raise the specter of, well, you're going to pay so much more for your food and so forth, hasn't made a dent. Really, these things are passing overwhelmingly, which says that people really want to see animals treated better. And that's a good toehold for us. Obviously, we want to raise the standard much, much farther than it is, even through those initiatives. But still, it's a sign that the public has really changed in their views, and that's a really, really important thing.
So, I think if you watch my show, Awesome Vegans, it probably seems like I'm Pollyanna and I just smile through everything. But I do want to say, what I love about this is no matter where you are on politics, to the left, to the right, in the middle, here's one thing we all agree on. I really think, as you say, overwhelmingly the ballot, nobody wants to see animals abused on factory farms. That's the majority. Of course, the business owners, but they're a minority. And if we saw anything from the last election, whether you like the results or you don't, either way, you see that the people can change things. So if you don't like the old regime, you see what the people can do. So if we don't like how animals are being treated, Republican, Democrat, Independent alike, we all don't like it, we can change it.
Yeah.
With the help of some good lawyers.
I would say... in our political system right now, there are very few things you can say are truly bipartisan.
I know. I love it.
And animal protection is one of them, and that is certainly a strength. People across the political spectrum vote in favor of increased protections for animals across the board, and for farmed animals in particular. So there's a lot of hope, and there's a lot of really good things happening right now to advance the cause for farmed animals in particular, but really for all animals.
I love to hear this, because sometimes you watch the news and you think, oh my word, there's no hope anywhere. UN climate report being one of those things, or you just think, oh my gosh, there's no hope. So I love to hear that actually things are changing. Maybe not as fast as we would like, but things are changing. Now, I think, again, all of this happens with the help of some great lawyers. Is this really a career that people can get behind? Are you seeing more and more animal rights lawyers who are doing it as a living, not pro bono?
Yeah. So that's another big change that's happened. I've been with the Animal Legal Defense Fund for almost 20 years now, which is hard for me to believe. But there's been so much change. And one of the ways, one of the things that's changed is there's still a lot of law students and a lot of really compassionate people going to law school specifically to help animals.
Really?
And of course, there are some job opportunities. They're hard to get, but you can work for the Animal Legal Defense Fund or the Humane Society of the United States, or other groups that have that hire lawyers to do animal protection work. But there's so many more opportunities now, even in other areas.
Like what?
Well, so let me tell you a really heartening story for me. I started a program at the Animal Legal Defense Fund to have student chapters of ALDF and roll it out to law schools across the country. Our student Animal Legal Defense Fund chapters, if there's any SALDF people out there, hello and thank you. And we're going to have a lot of them at our conference tomorrow and through the weekend. But some of the early chapters, I was directly involved with helping them get started and so forth. Of course, my role has changed very much since then. But I see some of the names of like the chairs of those student chapters from 15 years ago and so, who are now partners in big law firms. And they're coming to the Animal Legal Defense Fund now and saying, we want to do pro bono work for you. So we are actually inviting pro bono firms to come and work for us and so forth. So these lawyers in these positions at firms, maybe they're doing other work a lot of the times, but they are now able to actually sink their teeth into some really exciting animal protection work.
So they've come up the ranks.
Exactly.
And now they can actually make, they were making a difference before, but now that difference is hopefully bigger. That
exactly.
impact is bigger.
And I've seen, law school graduates who are going to work in all kinds of different areas, food safety work, environmental work, where factory farming is a focus. Also, going into policy. It's really important that we have people who get jobs as policymakers as well in government, both state and federal and so forth, and create change from the inside. So there are lots of opportunities. And of course, a law degree is a great thing to have for all kinds of jobs that don't necessarily involve like litigation specifically.
Public speaking. I was
legislative work.
Yes,
yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Let me ask you, what are some of the big initiatives that you have going on now? I think I saw a very interesting case about a horse that is suing its owner. Talk to me a little bit about that and some of the other cases that you have going on right now, and maybe you'll talk about them in the conference.
Sure. Many of listeners out there probably are aware that our laws still consider animals property, essentially things, much like the chairs we're sitting on, as opposed to living sentient beings that we know they are. And you need to look no further for the consequence. The consequences of that are across the board. It's why we can have things like factory farming and torture animals in that way, because it makes a profit. You think, just dissect the term livestock, if you want to think about that. Puppy mills, all these sorts of institutional types of cruelty. And if you look at what happened, the tragedy in North Carolina with the hurricane and the flooding, need look no further than it was perfectly okay for people to walk away from millions of animals, chickens and
4.1 birds,
and
4.1 million birds,
and 4.1 million lives.
Pigs. Yes, that's right.
Walk away, shut the doors, and let them drown. And this was, and it's akin to if these were owners of a convenience store and they just walked away and left, candy bars on the counter. No one would think twice about it. And that's essentially the same thinking goes into this. It's like, oh well, we're so that this is a consequence of the property status of animals. Really, fundamentally, it's a failure of our legal system as well. So we're always interested, in addition to like helping animals with lawsuits. Now we're always looking for ways to advance the law more generally to recognize the sentience, the living beingness of animals.
And where are we with that?
So we had a great case. You mentioned the case we have in Oregon, and built on some great legal work we've done in the past in Oregon. We thought it was the perfect state to try a case. Justice was a horse who in Oregon who was badly abused and neglected by his former owners. They were convicted of cruelty, and they were forced to pay for his medical treatment up to the point that they were convicted, which was last summer, 2017. But Justice, unfortunately, has injuries as a result of his abuse and neglect that he will suffer from for the rest of his life. He's happy and healthy now, I'm happy to say, but he will require vet care. We believe that the owners should pay for his vet care for the rest of his life. and we believe that Justice would agree. So Justice is now a plaintiff in a case, and we are his attorney. So Justice is the named plaintiff in that case, and that's a huge leap for the law. We haven't won the case yet, of course. That's the big hurdle. But we are going to an appeal on the case, so that's definitely one to watch. And it's exciting. I mean, we're getting to the place where, the courts did not say this was, far out of bounds.
Right. So that's what's interesting to me. The fact that you can even bring this to court and say this animal has rights and is its own individual in the case, if
That's
you
right.
will.
That's right.
And has there ever been precedent to this? I think there's a man. Why is his name escaping
Steve
me?
Wise.
Thank you, of course. I was going to say Steve Wells, but it's not, of course, because you're really with me right now.
We get
Steve
that
Wise.
confusion
Yes.
sometimes.
Sorry.
Yes. So Steve Wise, he's the founder of the Non-Human Rights Project,
Yes.
and he's taking a different
out.
approach in the law. He is fighting for actual personhood for animals,
Right.
and legal personhood, and he's focused on chimpanzees, and now he's focusing on an elephant. So we obviously wish Steve lots of luck. Big supporter of his work as well. Our approach is very different.
Okay.
So we're working with a little bit more traditional law, pushing it forward. And for example, in Oregon, the reason we thought the Justice case would be good there is, we have assisted in cases that criminal cases where we had a case that went all the way to the state Supreme Court that recognized that every individual animal can be considered an individual victim of a crime, and that sounds, pretty much like duh, but that's a big deal in the law.
Because then you're talking millions of.
And we're talking about, so the case in particular
victims.
involved a dozen horses, and usually in cruelty cases, they'll kind of consolidate that all into one charge of cruelty. And our argument was that, no, every single individual animal was a victim of a crime and deserves to have their day in court, and the charges should be a dozen. And we won on that all the way to the state Supreme Court. So that is the law of the land in Oregon. And we also worked on, changes to the state cruelty law that had some beneficial language, recognizing the sentience of animals. So that, these are important advances. And we think the law is coming around to recognizing. I mean, you can't, they don't recognize chairs as individuals or having sentience or these kinds of things. So we are seeing advances at that fundamental level as well.
What's the genesis for the law that says that animals are property? Because we've known since the time of Darwin, and I'm sure there's a scholar out there who can tell me even before Darwin that scientists have noted animals having emotions and being sentient beings. This is not some radical new thought or some Looney Tunes hug a tree, oh my gosh, I'm not a functioning member of society. This is a proven thing. Why are animals even considered property?
I'm not sure I could recount exactly all the reasons. It's obviously a great convenience for industries that use animals, and for the fact that animals are bought and sold like property. It would make sense to categorize them that way. You can go back quite a ways and say that we've been learning, at least since the time of Darwin, that the differences between humans and other animals is actually not that much.
Right.
And certainly no difference whatsoever in the key issues like how we feel and sense the world, our ability to feel pain and to suffer, and all
Have
those sorts of
families,
things, which is really all that should matter.
Language, all that should matter.
Communication.
Yes.
And then in the latter half of the 20th century, science, involving the sentience of animals just exploded, where we started to understand the really incredibly complex communication, the incredible social bonds that animals have with each other, how they communicate.
And they're young.
Yeah, absolutely. So our law is profoundly out of step with, I think, what our society thinks it does for animals, and it's profoundly out of step with science. And that's both horrifying when we see what it causes. It's also cause for hope because, historically, the law does lag behind oftentimes, but then it tends to catch up with important consequences.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
and we see that in other social justice movements,
Yes, we do.
which animal rights certainly is.
Yes, I was going to say that. Well, you do see that in other social justice movements. I think of marriage for same-sex partners, etc. You know, it was out of the question when Obama came into office, and then whoa, there you have it, 8 years later. So you can have a swoop of advancement, which is so wonderful. And I do think it's so out of step with what people want for animals, and thank you, social media, for helping people really see what goes on.
Absolutely.
And people have really taken to social media and been advocates for animals, which of course I love.
Absolutely.
So talk to me a little bit about the conference itself. What are you hoping to accomplish that's different than maybe other years, or what are you hoping for this conference?
Sure. So the conference, well, actually, just prior to the conference, tomorrow, Friday, we have started an annual tradition of having a student congress.
Oh, great.
So we're having law students that we're bringing in from across the country, members of our student chapters and so forth. And that's become a really incredibly inspiring event where they come together and share experiences. There's a writing contest that was involved, lots of things like that. And it was so well received last year that we're making it an annual thing. And then starting tomorrow night, we kick off the conference. As I said, it's going to be factory farming focused. So we'll certainly be dissecting the laws and what advances have been made and where the opportunities lie. So we're really, as always, it's not all lawyers and law students. It's mostly lawyers and law students, I think, in terms of attendance. But it's also, there's a lot of great information there for animal advocates of all stripes, really, and people who care about these issues. But we certainly hope to inspire more people to be involved, and we hope to educate lawyers and law students about where the opportunities lie and what's happened and what will be happening. So yeah, really interesting panels. We have some great keynotes. We have Seth Tibbetts, who's the CEO of Tofurkey.
Oh yes,
he's going to be speaking tomorrow night. Looking forward to hearing what he has to say. It's been a company that was way out in front in developing plant-based alternatives to meat. I went vegan personally. It's been 22 years now, and I lived in Alaska at the time, and it was not easy 22 years ago to find vegan food in Alaska, as you can imagine.
Right.
And I can remember Tofurkey was around then, and they were making the old Tofurkey, and they had these box meals you could get that had the whole, sort of traditional Thanksgiving meal, vegan style. And I can remember ordering them and having them shipped up FedEx, and we were so excited to get these Tofurkey meals up in Alaska via FedEx.
FedEx me my Tofurkey to Alaska, please.
Yes. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Tofurkey and what they've been able to do. And then Saturday night, our keynote at the banquet will be, we'll have Joanne, oh God, I'm forgetting her last name. I will come back to her name. I cannot believe I'm completely blanking. But she's a photographer and has been doing incredible work, photographing, doing undercover work, investigations on factory farms. She has the book We Animals.
Yes, and she's the one who put forth a lot of the pictures that we've been seeing recently, I believe, from factory farms.
She has done a lot, and she's had some, and she has a new book. She'll be signing the books and so forth. And boy, I am really embarrassed right now that I
I'll put it in the notes to this video, so don't worry.
Yeah. So, but she's going to be talking about how she's managed to get the kind of photographs. I mean, really, some very intense photographs, what's happening inside factory farms. But she does it with a lot of heart and a lot of compassion, and tells their stories both via video and photography and so forth. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
Wow, wonderful. Well, you brought up something, and I know, of course, we have lots of questions still to work through. But I just want to ask you one question. You had said, well, we want to go over all of the opportunities for the law students that are here and for the lawyers as well. And to what extent, because sometimes I read the newspaper and I think, I can't believe this person got 3 months for something that's horrific. And I know you hear what I'm saying out there. Yeah. You'll read the newspaper and there'll be something god-awful that the only objective was to torture. And the judge gives them something like 3 months or something really ridiculous, not even a slap on the hand. So how much is left to the judge's interpretation or really the law itself?
That's a great question. So as I mentioned before, all 50 states have their individual anti-cruelty laws. And the reality is that the laws vary tremendously state to state.
Sure.
And one of the things that the Animal Legal Defense Fund does is to do rankings of all 50 state animal cruelty laws, which is a great resource for advocates who want to change the laws in their states. Illinois, our home state, was number one. Yeah, I think for 5 years running, Illinois has been number one.
Go, Illinois, go.
And Kentucky has been dead last for, I believe, 11 years or 12 years we've been doing
program,
the rankings.
Kentucky.
Yeah, so there's inspiration there. But, there's a lot of surprises as well. One of the things was one of the horrible cases facts that, like you mentioned, there was a really tragic case of a dog beaten to death by her owner in New York and Long Island, and witnessed by many people.
Oh my God.
And the individual was arrested. I mean, this is a really horrible, aggravated, direct cruelty. And the prosecution did a great job. We provided some assistance. Nevertheless, that person only received a 4-month sentence. And
so that just makes me mad, because I don't know who that judge is helping, because there's such a direct correlation from animal cruelty to people who are cruel to each other.
Well, in this case, it really wasn't, it can't be laid at the judge's feet.
Okay.
Part of the problem is that New York on our rankings ranks 42nd.
Hey, New York,
out of
totally
50
unacceptable.
states. Yeah, and I was in New York just last week, and I was talking about this, and New Yorkers are horrified by that. So we're offering a solution. We will be introducing a bill in the next legislative session in January. We're naming it after the dog victim, whose name was Bella. This will be called Bella's Bill. And so New Yorkers out there,
get ready.
Definitely help us pass Bella's Bill.
When is this coming?
So this January, I believe, is when the legislative session starts. So as soon as we can get it introduced after that, we have bipartisan support lined up. So we're very excited about that.
All right. Well, our time here is short, as he obviously has a very busy weekend. So I just have a couple last questions, kind of one-word answers off the top of your head, really kind of off the cuff.
All right. I'm ready.
What food are we always going to find in your fridge?
Oh, good question. Let's see, Miyoko's cheese.
Yes, and of course she's
Miyoko,
here all weekend.
we love you. Yes,
we love you, Miyoko.
We'll see you.
We love you. Yes, and we eat your stuff all the time. Okay, what is your favorite snack? It can be junk food or it can be healthy. It's up to you. You can roll either way.
Yeah, no, mine is likely to be junk food, and I prefer the salty version. Let's see, I really like my favorite is the blue corn sesame chips. Sesame Blues, they're called. Those are my favorite corn chips in the world, and I love them.
All right. Who makes them?
I think it's Garden of Eden or Barbara's.
Yes. I know them.
Yeah.
Oh, there was a period in my life that was basically Garden of Eden blue chips. Now I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And there's one
and the ones with the sesame are so good.
I know. Okay.
So good.
All right.
Yeah.
My next question is, you're super busy, you're traveling a lot. What is your one go-to meal you can walk through the door, make it in 5 minutes, it's always good?
At home.
Yes, the thing you always make, it's your go-to, like it's a standard, it's always good.
Since I travel a lot and my diet often is not as healthy as it could be because I'm eating quick things. I will steam or roast a bunch of vegetables and some quinoa and season it with some olive oil and spices, and I'm a happy guy.
Yes, and it's heavy. The bowls are such a good way to feel satiated and like you got a lot going on.
Absolutely.
Okay, now this question might require a little bit of thought. What do you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now?
Oh, that's a great question. Let's see. What do I wish I knew? I guess if I were to go back and think about, I don't know if it's 10 years, but if I thought backwards about, sort of a career in advocacy, I wish I had been as pragmatic and as welcoming to people who are not vegan and far from vegan and so forth, in terms of like understanding that we need these people to understand, and we want to reach out to them, and as vegans, if you are vegan, that presenting a welcoming, sort of happy, smiling version of veganism is going to influence a lot more people than sort of being angry and upset. Even though people who care about farmed animals have lots of reasons to be angry and upset.
Yeah,
for sure.
4.1 million, and add 5,500 to that, and that would be how many reasons you have right now.
That's right.
Well, I'll just add to that I love to cook for non-vegans. I love to cook for you. Come over to my place because I make a seriously very good vegan gyros. So I'm up to it, people. So hit me up. I will cook for you. Okay, 2 more final questions. Is there a phrase that you live by? And I'll give you an example, like something that you run through your head when you need encouragement. So one of the phrases that I love is eyes to the sky, nose to the ground. Nose to the grindstone, eyes to the sky.
Oh, I like that.
So anything that you have that's, a body in motion stays in motion. That's also one of my favorites.
Yeah, I'll use, it's actually an ALDF saying, but I love it and I think about it and repeat it often, and that is, we may be the only lawyers on earth whose clients are all innocent.
Oh, I love it. Okay, amen. Thank you for that. Well, my final question for you, and I think this is, my second to final question. What made you go vegan 22 years ago?
So I had gone vegetarian in the early 90s, mostly for environmental reasons, honestly.
Okay.
I was driven very much by the environment, cared about wildlife and the outdoors, and that's how I wound up in Alaska. And I hadn't given a lot of thought to the animals, to be honest, directly that we were using. And it just so happened I knew somebody who had worked for a big dairy company. Not on one of the farms, but in their headquarters, which was in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And she had mentioned to me one time that in the office, she would have to process these lists, these huge spreadsheets that were line by line. They were the disposition of individual calves. Mostly the male calves. And she explained to me, I asked, wow, where were all the calves for? And this was, I was in my mid-20s. And it had not dawned on me until that moment that to keep the milk flowing, you have to keep the cows pregnant and having babies. Yes. And what happens to the babies? And that's where I learned that male calves to these companies were essentially a waste product that they had to deal with. Yes. And I was so horrified by that, and I was sort of horrified with myself that I hadn't realized, even though it's basic biology, that female mammals don't produce milk unless they're pregnant or recently have given birth, that I hadn't even thought about the calves. And so then I made the connection to veal, and that got me. It just started the whole. I'm vegetarian already. And then I learned more about what happens to layer chickens and battery cages, and that was it. I was done.
Yes. And it's easy for me. Yeah, and it's for many people. It's like an immediate switch. It certainly was for me. I just wanted to know that because you had done it so long ago. So I just thought I would ask. Okay, so my very last question, and they're kind of tied, which is why I asked this of you. So I think it's clear that you have a very strong sense of purpose. Obviously, you're so dedicated with ALDF. Is there one thing that you'd like to be known for? Because you do so much good work. Is there one thing, if people remember you, you'd say, that's really the thing I want to be known for?
Well, I would say overall, I would like to be known as a person who tries my best to live, to be compassionate and to live my values. And I do try and do that from an environmental perspective. And so a lot of that has to do with keeping an open mind and never forgetting that whatever I think I know and whatever I think I'm doing well right now, there's always something more to learn. We should always be expanding our circle of compassion. And that means for animals, for people, for the environment, all those sorts of things. And I hope for as long as I live that I'm never think I've figured it all out. And I'm always learning and always figuring out how I can do more and expand my circle of compassion.
I would add to that and say, if you do your best, then you're always realizing that you can better your best.
That's right.
So just keep at it. Just doing the best you can
well
do.
Said.
Every day's going to be a little different, but just do your best that you can do that day, and you're going to keep upping the bar. So,
absolutely.
And I thank you for doing so much, really. And Animal Legal Defense Fund, I do love you, and thank you for all the work you do. I think ultimately it has to change legally. So it starts with the law. If we don't change the law, all of our protests and whatever, they're just not going to do as much as they should if we don't have the law behind us. And so that's Stephen. So really, I do want to thank you. Until I see you again next time, don't forget to be vegan.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.